Um, Welcome everybody, and particularly Lisa Morgan, the Wildlife Trust South and West Wales Head of Islands and Marine. We're looking forward to seeing her or listening to her talk. Lisa started in conservation way back in 2001. She spent the first couple of years on Stockholm as the assistant warden, and then after that, that really was the sort of defining tour for her, shaping her future career, choosing where she's going to live, and really stabilizing her sort of love of marine and especially seabirds and seals. And then after a couple of years on Stockholm, she moved and did the same pretty much in Skåne, and then went to Ramsey, where she was a warden for 14 years. I can't believe she's crammed all of that in, because she still only looks about 20 to me. But there you go. Anyhow, it was in that capacity that Lisa gave us an excellent presentation. Some of you may remember it a few years ago in Haverfordwest. And also one of the very best events I think we've ever had, certainly in my time here, which was our day on Ramsey Island. So we thank her greatly for that. And as is the way of these things, once we've got our claws into some people, we can't let go of them. So she's back here again now. So thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule, Lisa, to talk to us about your new role. And tell us what's happening on the islands of Marine. So over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Ian. That was very kind.
Before that, can I just ask everybody to mute?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I think we're okay now. Good.
Great. Okay. Yes. Well, thank you for having me, and it's really nice to see some faces that I remember from various visits out and about, probably on Ramsey. But yes, as Ian said, I'm at Dale Fort, so I live a mile down the road in Dale. But the difference between the Wi-Fi in my house and the Wi-Fi here is, well, it's a million miles apart. So I'm very grateful to Dale Fort, who have loaned me one of their classrooms, because they're not really teaching big groups at the moment. So it's ideal for things like this. So I assume that the Wi-Fi here is going to be absolutely perfect, and I don't have to worry about it, which would be quite novel for me, I have to say. So one less thing to worry about. But I do have one less screen than normal in front of me. So just bear with me and I'll try and share the right screen. So can one of you shout at me if it's not what you're expecting to see? And also, if you can't hear me or you lose me or something goes wrong, can you shout as well, just to let me know? Because it's quite difficult on Zoom to sort of tell if people are still here or not. So yeah, I'll rely on Ian, one of the Ians, to let me know if it's not working properly. Right, let's try this.
Perfect.
Okay, fine. There we are. I think we're okay. Just checking I've got what I need. There we are. Right, so I have lots of notes for this presentation, but I can't see them because I don't have my other screen. So I am going to pretty much make it up as I go along. So bear with me if it's all a bit rambly, but I'll try and get there. And if I'm going way too over time, just shout at me as well, because I've timed it with the notes I had, but I can't see them. So there we are. We'll see how we get on. So yeah, Ian's already sort of introduced me, really, which was very kind of him. I'm not sure about the looking like 20. I feel about 50, 60 at the moment after the year we've had. But yes, I mean, I started coming to Pembrokeshire when I was 16 as a volunteer with the Wildlife Trust on Skåne and Skåkum. And then as a result of those volunteering summers when I was studying, I got my first sort of short jobs with the Wildlife Trust, and as Ian mentioned, as assistant warden or doing some sort of field work, seabirds and seals mainly on both islands. And obviously then that led to that role with the RSPB, and I've been in that role, as many of you will know, for 14 years until quite recently. So yeah, all the islands are very dear to my heart. I know them reasonably well, hopefully, and I'll tell you a bit about the islands that I've sort of come back to, really. So I've gone a bit full circle, having started off with the Wildlife Trust. I'm now back looking after Skåne and Skåkum. So yeah, it's great for me, a perfect job really, when it popped up in April 2020, that a role came up to look after Skåne and Skåkum, among other things. So yeah, it was something that I couldn't really ignore when it came up with the Wildlife Trust. So yeah, obviously I've been on Ramsey and Grasshome, and I know lots of you visited Ramsey, and we went on a guided walk there a few years ago. Still, the walk, I think it was the longest guided walk myself and my volunteer have ever done. And my volunteer, Jeff, I don't know if any of you remember him, but he still talks about it to this day. He absolutely loved that day with you. So yeah, it's really lovely. Every time I speak to him, he reminds me of that walk. So yeah, lots of you will know Ramsey. And probably a little bit about Grasshome as well. So although I have left Ramsey, so I left Ramsey and the RSPB back in April 2020, I still visit Ramsey as often as I can. So just to let you know what's going on the islands really, because I know obviously no one was able to visit any of the islands last year. We are now open again, but it's nice to sort of share with you some of the things that are going on the islands, but also to introduce you to some of the staff, because I know you've probably, I'm sure you have talks and you meet some of our terrestrial staff with the Wildlife Trust out and about. So Nathan Walton, you probably all know, and I'm sure he's spoken to you. But I guess the island teams are a bit hidden away, and you may not bump into us quite as often as you with the terrestrial side of things. So I'll just sort of let you know who's who and what's going on the island, so that you're sort of familiar with us all. But Ramsey, still very close to my heart. My sheepdog Derry still works for the RSPB on Ramsey. He's still a working dog at 13. So I get out to Ramsey as often as I can to visit my sheep and the dog. And just so you know as well, lots of you will probably know Nia Stevens. She actually used to work for the Wildlife Trust South and West Wales. So she was up at Kilgarran for several years at the Welsh Wildlife Centre looking after the reserve up there with Nathan. And Nia is now the Ramsey warden. So she took my old job, and I'm absolutely thrilled about it because she's wonderful. And one of my best friends. She's a fantastic ecologist who came back from NRW actually to the Ramsey role this year. She's also a farmer with her own sheep in St David's, so you'll all see her out and about, and I'm sure lots of you know her, but just so you know that she's now the Ramsey and Grasshome warden, and as I say, I couldn't be happier about that. So look out for Nia as well. I'm sure she'll take you on a guided walk of Ramsey one day very soon. And just to mention Grasshome as well, obviously it's still out there. And when I left the RSPB, it was something I was very keen to do, was keep a little bit of some of the projects that I'd been involved in with the RSPB. And there's a lovely study that we've been running out there since 2006 with Exeter University, and it's looking at adult survival of gannets. So there's lots of birds out there that I've known sort of personally almost since 2006 that are all marked with plastic Darvik rings so that we can identify them. So when I left the RSPB, it was a bit of a condition really that I would keep that little project running. So I have still got the connections with Grasshome, and I've been out several times this year to look for some of those birds. So I've still got the links to the other islands, which is actually really useful in my job because obviously Wildlife Trust and RSPB, you know, are very closely linked in lots of the work we do with the islands, especially now. So yeah, keeping those links between RSPB and WITSU is really key to what we do. So going back to the Wildlife Trust then, so some of you will remember Lizzy Wilberforce as well, who I'm sure you've all known for many years and would have bumped into on various occasions across the Wildlife Trust region. So Lizzy left the Wildlife Trust in April, and I took on the marine part of her role. So it was just as COVID was really kicking in March 2020, when Lizzy left us, and the idea was that the Wildlife Trust would recruit two roles. We pretty much split Lizzy in half because she was a superhuman woman. So the intention was to create a terrestrial role and a marine and islands role. The marine and islands role is me, and I was recruited in April 2020, but we never quite got round to recruiting the terrestrial role to replace the other part of Lizzy's job. So at the moment, lots of people are sort of chipping in and doing the other bits of Lizzy's job, including myself. But hopefully when everything settles down in the next few months, we'll recruit that other part of Lizzy's role. So just so you know how that sort of, well, how we hope that will pan out with the Wildlife Trust in the coming months. But yes, I'm very glad that I've only got half of Lizzy's job. Let's just put it that way, because it's huge. I don't know how she did it. So yeah, when I started my role back in April 2020, we were just going into lockdown. So the first year of my job as head of Islands and Marine has been very unusual, I think, to say the least. And most of my time, like everybody else last year, was spent in front of the computer. I didn't get anywhere near an island until September last year, or any of my staff actually. So it was really a very strange start to a role. And there were lots of evenings like this, basically sitting on a laptop like we're doing now, in various meetings and eating my dinner in front of the computer. So quite a difference between being a Ramsey warden out and about all the time to sitting at home in Dale. So yeah, a big change and a bit of a culture shock for me, I guess, really. But I think everyone was going through the same thing at the same time. Having said that, Dale is a fantastic place to live, I have to say, after Ramsey, which is quite difficult to top. But we live at the top of the Gann estuary, and we have plenty of wildlife that pops in and out of our garden to keep me amused, even though I was stuck in the office. So yeah, our otters and badgers are very nice thing to see to keep us all sane as we were going through COVID and everything else. Also in my role, just as a bit of an aside, but I'm also the health and safety lead for the Wildlife Trust, which I was quite looking forward to, really, because I do like a bit of health and safety, which is very unusual for a warden. But you know, I don't mind it. You know, I'm quite encouraging of it all. But of course, then COVID kicked in, and actually the health and safety side of my role has pretty much taken up, I would say, I don't know, 80% of my time in the first 16 months of my role. So yeah, not quite what I imagined, I guess. And I now know an awful lot about COVID, as does everyone else. So yeah, if we come forward to this year then, so yeah, 2020, let's try and forget about that one. 2021, obviously, we were extremely keen to try and get people back onto our islands. So in 2020, we did have our wardens on site. We managed to keep a team of 2 wardens on Skoma and on Skocum right through the season. So they managed to do all of that really important seabird monitoring, you know, maintain those long-term data sets of seabird work that have been running for 40 years or more on the islands. So that was our key objective, really. So my task last year was really to keep them on site, keep them safe, and let them get on with their jobs, really. But funding their existence on the island sort of became my main sort of role, really, and trying to find some funding to help pay their salaries in a year where we had no income at all. You know, with the islands closed, the Wildlife Trust is very heavily reliant on the income from the islands, you know, the day visitors, the overnight accommodation, and of course all our cafes and visitor centres across the trust. So not having that income coming in and trying to keep our staff on site was pretty difficult. But anyway, in the end, all fine, and we managed to keep them where they were, as I'm sure you are aware. So yeah, we spent a lot of time over winter and early this year trying to risk assess how we could get visitors to Skoma and Skocum and do it safely. And boats, although they're open air, are public transport, and they, you know, have a carrying capacity of 50 normally, which clearly wasn't going to be an option for us. So yeah, we tried all sorts of things. Yeah, using myself as a guinea pig usually, and eventually we managed to sort of get it all sorted and work out a way of getting people to the island safely. So yeah, back in March, massive relief to see the Dale Princess back on the water, I have to say. We were all very pleased to see her. And yeah, we were excited to start getting the staff back out to the island at the start of the year. And Skocum went first, so they went back to the island at the end of February. So they actually went quite early this year. So there was a little window in the weather, and we managed to get them back on site. So a little bit earlier than last year. And yeah, just as I said, some of you may or may not know our island wardens, but Richard and Giselle, they have been on Skocum. This is their 9th season, so they are back for their 9th year now. So a really good, safe pair of hands on Skocum, which is great. And as I say, they went back at the end of February. Yeah, taking advantage of the nice weather. And there's all their stuff arriving. As you can imagine, there's a lot of stuff to go out at that time of year. And they've had a really busy year, actually. It's a bit of an odd year this year, because although we were really struggling for income for sort of basic things like paying people's wages, there was actually quite a lot of money knocking about in conservation. Mainly with NRW, so Natural Resources Wales had a lot of money to buy things for charities, capital things, so vehicles like you see here, because they hadn't been able to spend the money themselves. So they were desperate to try and buy stuff for us. So we were in this really strange position where we had all this bits of kit and nice things coming our way, but we're sort of struggling at the other end of things. So this is Dale Sailing's barge that came from Neyland, with 2 new vehicles for Skocum, paid for by Natural Resources Wales. So they had a new dumper truck delivered with a bespoke sort of carrying bucket on the front, which was specially made so that they carry all their luggage and building materials that come to the island. So that was fantastic. That's their old dumper, their old Thwaites dumper going back ashore on the boat going back. And they had a new John Deere Gator as well for carrying sort of smaller luggage, shopping, food shopping and things like that. So they've now got 2 brand new vehicles, sort of as a result of COVID, really, ironically, because there was money to be spent and it had to be spent in the tax year as it ended in April. So some nice new vehicles for them. And then it was Skoma's turn. So we managed to get Skoma back out on the 1st of March, which was great as planned. And another little window in the weather. Again, well, completely different to Skocum, really. New staff, all new staff, but yeah, lots of kit to go back out with Dale Sailing. So this is on the Dale Princess on the 1st of March. And just to introduce you to the team there as well. So this is Leighton, this is our new warden. So Leighton Newman, who some of you might know. So if you've stayed on Skoma as an overnight guest, he was our hostel warden. So he was our visitor officer for 3 years. And then he left us to go to the National Trust, and he's been at Blakeney Point as a head ranger there for the last 3 years. But really pleased to have Leighton back as our warden on Skoma. So we now have 1 head warden in charge of the team there. So Leighton's back, and you'll see him out and about, hopefully, and see him on the island if you go across to visit. Keris Aston, so she is our assistant warden. She was actually our assistant warden last year, but after a month was furloughed, unfortunately, by me. So I felt terribly guilty ever since, because I had to send her home last May. But Keris, brilliant to have her back, really. So Keris is our assistant warden on the island for 9 months with Leighton. And then Beth Thompson, who some of you might know from Cardigan Bay. So Beth was our Living Seas engagement officer at the Cardigan Bay site up in Newquay for the last year. So doing lots of education stuff, lots of visitor stuff up there for the team. So Beth is now our visitor officer on Skoma. So she's also on the island for the season as well. So they're the people you're going to meet if you go to Skoma this year. So yeah, when Keris, Beth and Leighton got back to Skoma, they had a really lovely surprise waiting for them in the shape of this massive rockfall in North Haven. So I'd been out to Skoma in January and February, and there was no sign of this. But when the guys arrived back on the 1st of March, there was about 60 tons of rock and debris and ivy and mud and everything else blocking basically the access to the island. So this is the beach landing that some of you will know in North Haven. And it's actually really important, this landing, for things coming to the island, building materials, big stuff, and for the island boat as well. So obviously there was a huge issue here, and that had to be cleared. So it was a huge amount of work, all by hand actually, with a small team of us to move that rubble out of the way and all that rock. And then we've obviously had since an engineer out to look at that cliff face. So this is just literally below the North Haven house. So this is a rock engineering company from North Wales who came and made it safe, or as safe as they could. I've just had a sort of report from them about how to make that cliff safe. And I won't go into the details, but I'm sure you can imagine it's quite a complicated piece of work to secure that cliff face. And yeah, it's eye-watering the amount it's going to cost. So we won't talk about that now. I just need to work out how to pay for it. But it's really important to keep that access clear for our staff and people landing privately as well. Lots of yachts come ashore there in their tenders, so we need it to be safe. And this is the other reason we needed to clear that landing. So Skoma also had lots of nice new kit this year, again paid for by various grants. Yeah, lots and lots of stuff, but the most important thing they had was lots of new solar panels. So we've now increased the capacity to capture solar power on Skomer, and that's giving electricity to our staff, our visitors, our volunteers, everybody on the island. And these panels were paid for by the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park Authority Sustainable Development Fund grant. So Jess Morgan at the parks has helped me with this. And yeah, they funded all of this new stuff for the island. So new solar panels for North Haven. So there they are on the house. So yeah, new panels to replace some very, very old panels that are very inefficient. Also a UV filter so that they've got safe drinking water down at North Haven as well. And then lots more panels up at the farm on Skomer. So this is providing power for our volunteers and our staff, but also our overnight guests as well. So yeah, brilliant grant that we had from the park. So we're very grateful for that. And then the other thing we had to wrestle with really was not only how do we get people to the island safely on the boat, but how do we move people safely around Skomer once they got to us? And of course, we're still talking about COVID here. So we were really worried about people moving around the island on the narrow footpaths on Skomer. And obviously loads of you will know that Skomer is massively burrowed, you know, so that you really can't step even a centimetre off the path in places without collapsing a Manxie Otter or a puffin burrow. And having been walking on the coast path a lot over winter and seeing people very politely moving to the side to let people pass and allow 2 meters social distancing and all of that, you know, which is great and it's fine on the coast path here, but we couldn't have that happening on Skomer. So we sort of created a little bit of a one-way system, which is not massively strict, but all our visitors this year have been following a kind of route around the island, and they've been taking the coastal path in an anti-clockwise direction so they don't cross. And actually a few extra signs, and it's worked brilliantly well. And I think we'll probably keep it in place because it just helps the flow of people around the island and stops us having those big gatherings of people at the Wick and those hotspots where people want to spend lots of time. So yeah, a one-way system as a result of COVID, but here to stay. And then in Martin's Haven, we had to think really hard about Martin's Haven. We obviously get lots and lots of people going down there to wait for boats and to board boats. And we couldn't have lots of people queuing and gathering in big numbers. So yeah, the team at Lockley Lodge, so Gary and Chrissy have been working really hard over there. They've got puffin footprints on the floor so that people can follow them and keep 2 meters apart and all of that stuff, which we were trying out in the photos here. But the most important thing that lots of you may have seen is that we now have online booking for Skomer day trips for the first time ever. And it's been a long time coming, but it's hopefully something positive that's come from COVID because it's working brilliantly well. Obviously we're running at reduced capacity at the moment, but we do have the capacity to bring that back up to full boats next year, and to bring those costs down as well. So the boat trips were a little bit more expensive this year because we were running with 24 rather than 50 people on board. But the online booking system will allow us to do that in future. And hopefully it just stops people having to queue up in the road at 4 o'clock in the morning, as was happening at times during the puffin season. So I hope, I don't know if anyone's experienced it or tried to use it. I definitely have. We've had lots of positive comments about it. So I'd be very interested to know what anyone thinks of it if you have tried to go to Skomer this year. And then the other last sort of bit of the jigsaw really was to get everyone safe on the island. So we've got staff on Skomer and Skocum. They do have to help people off boats, and they are in sort of quite close contact with people. And so we're very keen to have them vaccinated. So these are the nurses from the health board here, taking a lovely day trip to Skomer, in fact 2, because I had to do both vaccines obviously. And yeah, they were brilliant. They sent nurses to the islands, and we managed to get Skocum and Skomer all vaccinated in one go on site. And yeah, as I say, they had a lovely day out, and the nurses got to see puffin chicks and shearwater chicks and all sorts of stuff, which they loved. So yeah, how they were brilliant, and very grateful to them for making everyone safe. So yeah, it's a little bit early to give you all the seabird numbers for Skomer and Skocum this year, although pretty much they're in and sort of just about finalised, but there's a few bits of work that are still going on. But I suppose the big story this year that everybody wanted to know about was the puffins again. So the numbers are up on Skomer and Skocum. We did a count in early April on Skomer, so Leighton, myself, Karis and Beth, and we counted nearly 35,000 individuals. in the evening when the birds are just coming in before they lay their eggs. So, you know, good time to catch them all. And also Skokums numbers were up by about 4,000 on last year as well. So puffin numbers continue to go up. They're the highest really that we've had pretty much post-war really, so Second World War. So the numbers are still going up and still very healthy, recovering really. But yeah, puffins are a bit of a success story at the moment. But yeah, just to talk about a little bit about some of the things that are sort of taking up some of my time, I suppose, in my sort of the marine part of my job. Obviously our seabirds, as I'm sure everybody knows, although the puffins are a slight oddity at the moment, you know, lots of our birds are struggling, and seabirds globally are one of the probably the most threatened family of birds on the planet for lots of reasons. And we do still have major issues with some of our birds, kittiwakes, the gulls, the bigger gulls as well. Their numbers are still, you know, really struggling and crashing in the case of kittiwake across Pembrokeshire. So we're really worried about some of them. And there's quite a few factors influencing seabird numbers, and you know, it's a bit of a just a mix of all those factors that are causing issues across the planet. But you know, some of them are local to us, things like pollution, plastic pollution that we know about from Grasham Island especially, and from our beach cleans that we all get involved in. There's the massive issue of climate changing and seawater temperatures changing and all of those things. And then there's just pressures on the use of the marine environment really, and we're starting to see that very acutely here in Pembrokeshire. So this is just a bit of an example of what's taking up a lot of my time, just so you get a bit of an idea about what's happening with us in the sort of marine team. So this is very pertinent to us in Pembrokeshire, and I'm sure lots of you are aware of the sudden interest in floating offshore wind in Pembrokeshire. So this is the first project that came to my attention pretty much just after I started in this role. So Erebus is a demonstration floating offshore wind project. It's going to sit about 40 kilometres south of Skokum. So Skokum's the nearest point. And this is a starter, a sort of precursor really, to test the technology. So you can see the floating platforms here. They're basically fixed to the seabed with anchors. So they're chained and then anchors fix them to the seabed. So the idea is that they're a lot less damaging to the environment because they don't need, oh, hang on, my slides are moving on their own, go back. Yes, so they don't need permanent fixings, lots of drilling on the seabed, so there shouldn't be lots of noise, there shouldn't be lots of sediment or damage to the seabed because they're floating and just fixed with anchors. And obviously they can then be moved in and out. If something goes wrong with one of the turbines, they should be able to float it back into Pembroke Dock or wherever they take it to fix it. So ideally, you know, they do look fantastic, and you know, as a wildlife trust, we're very supportive of marine renewables and obviously generating more of our power from renewable sources. So Erebus is 9 turbines. It's a start. Here's a little map. It's not the clearest map, it's just come from the developers who are called Blue Gem Wind. But you can see the little shape. I don't know if you can see my pointer, probably not, but the thing that looks like a little sticking plaster just outside the Marine Special Area of Conservation is the site of Erebus, just so you know where it will be. The islands you can see up there as well, and Grasham Island, the SPA around Grasham, the Special Protection Area, is the kind of purple striped hexagon there as well. So that's Erebus, and that's where it's going to sit. Now this is another development. So hot on the heels of the demonstration floating offshore wind are commercial scale floating offshore wind. So these are much bigger developments. They're up to 300 megawatts in size. And yeah, these are big commercial scale, generating a lot of power. You can see the cable route running in from Walrus. So Walrus sits next door to Erebus. It's a big development. It will certainly come along within the lifespan of the initial site. So Erebus and Walrus will sit side by side and be operating at the same time, basically. As a wildlife trust, we're quite concerned about the impacts on some of our seabirds that commute through the area that Erebus and Valorous will sit in. So again, very supportive of the technology, but we're very worried about the location, bearing in mind our shearwater population. So developers have never worked anywhere in the world, clearly, where there are so many Manx shearwaters commuting daily between the islands and their foraging grounds. They all come through this area where the turbines will be. And also our gannets. So the RSPB are particularly worried about the grass-home birds as well, also moving through that site. So we're doing lots and lots of work at the moment, looking at the environmental impact assessments, how we can make these turbines as sort of safe for birds as they can be, whilst hopefully generating some clean power offshore and bringing it into Pembrokeshire. So this is a lot of work for everybody at the moment to make these developments as good as they can be. My main issue is the shearwaters, I think. I mean, I obviously have the privilege of working with Oxford University on SCOMA and some of the world's most important and sort of well-respected seabird biologists. And when they tell me how concerned they are about these things, I have to take note, really. So they are extremely worried about the impacts on some of our seabird populations of these devices going in the location that they want to put them. So I think it's something to sort of, if you're interested, keep up to date with it, because it's changing very, very quickly. We have Valorous and Erebus currently off Skocum. The Crown Estate have just announced 3 more seabed leases for floating offshore wind, and they're all again in the southwest approaches to our islands. So what started as one tiny demonstration site is now a demonstration site plus 4 huge commercial floating developments in a kind of ring around our islands. So keep an eye out for it, keep abreast of it. And yeah, it's quite scary. The pace of the stuff that's going on is really quick. So we're all struggling to keep up with it. That's what I would say. All the charities are working together on this. So RSPB, WITSU, JNCC, BTO, everybody's involved, and we're trying to, between us, do the right thing and make it as good as it can be. But the developers are full steam ahead for these things to go in the water. So keep up to date with it, but it's moving fast. So that's taking up a huge amount of our time at the moment. And then, yes, just another thing really that, thinking about our seabird populations and other threats to seabirds is biosecurity, and it's really key on islands, as I'm sure lots of you are aware. We have huge burrow nesting seabird populations on our islands, and we're very, very lucky to have that in Pembrokeshire. So with SCOMA alone, you've got 350,000 pairs of Manx shearwaters on SCOMA. There's 90,000 on Skocum. There's a growing population on Ramsey. We've got 36,000 pairs of gannets on Grassholm, all nesting on the ground. So all these birds and all the islands are particularly vulnerable to invasive non-native species really arriving, which is what we don't want to happen. So we've been doing it's a really nice example of another partnership project with RSPB, with National Trust, with a project called Biosecurity for Life. And you can see their website here and a bit of their information. But they're basically a project to bring together all the charities that own islands and own seabird SPAs, special protection areas around the UK, to make sure they're all as well protected as they can be from invasive species arriving. So this is a project we're working on in Pembrokeshire. Loads of information going out to all sorts of boat owners and kayakers and water users and our visitors as well to the island, just helping people to make sure their boats are safe, they're not carrying any stowaways and landing on beaches and things like that. And as a result of these projects, the islands here, and hopefully eventually all the seabird islands around the UK, will have really good biosecurity plans. So Ramsey has one, the Wildlife Trust and the National Trust have one that covers SCOMA, Skocum and Middlehome. And they're just plans that help island staff, myself, my wardens, to know exactly what to do, how to monitor for invasive species, especially rats. It's probably the key one for us. And yeah, what to do in the terrible event that something goes wrong and someone spots a rat or a shipwrecks on SCOMA. there's a plan in place to react very quickly if that should happen. So something I've been doing in the last couple of weeks with James Roden, who's the National Trust Ranger for the area, who some of you will know as well, is we've been landing on Middlehome Island. So I've never been on Middlehome, which sits between the Deer Park and Skomer, as I'm sure lots of you know. And it's a really small island, it's under 9 hectares in size. But yeah, it's like a stepping stone to Skomer. And this photo is taken from Middlehome, and that's Skomer on the other side of Little Sound. So Little Sound's 100 metres wide. You can just see how close Middlehome is to Skomer. And you know how easy it would be for something to cross across those islands and get to Skomer. Having said that, Middlehome's also really important in its own right. It's got 16,000 pairs of Manx otters on it. So Middlehome in itself is a massively important site for the National Trust. And that's it looking the other way, so that from above, that's Skomer on the right and Middlehome on the left of the screen. So you can see how close together they are. And that's looking the other way. So this is me standing on Middlehome looking at the Deer Park. So you can see that's Jack Sound, which is about 600 metres wide, fast flowing, which should keep everyone safe and the island safe. But on the low tide, when you look at it, I thought this was quite interesting. On the low tide, you've got 2 rocks that kind of step across Jack Sound as well, which I'm sure all the boatmen are very aware of because they would be avoiding them all the time. But it just goes to show how something could cross from the mainland quite easily. So as part of this project with the Biosecurity for Life team, James and myself, so there's James up on Middlehome telling me what to do, probably. This is us landing in the last few weeks. So we've had lovely calm weather. We've been using a Dale sailing boat with a rib, a tender on the back, and we've been rowing or getting ashore from the tender. And we've been busy putting surveillance stations on Middlehome. So these are basically just they're the kind of thing you buy to put rat poison in, but there's no poison in these. They're positioned around Middlehome as a way of keeping an eye out for invasive species. So there's 9 stations dotted around Middlehome now, and inside those stations there are blocks. They're chocolate blocks. Some of you might have seen these before on the other islands, but basically what we do is we don't want to put poison in traps because some islands have small mammals already present. We don't want to go killing lots of Skomer voles or whatever it is for no reason. So we use wax blocks. They're made in muffin molds, and basically we melt down candles and then we mix up the melted wax with chocolate, with gravy, with coconut oil, anything that rats would like to chew on, basically. So these are chocolate blocks here. And then we put them in the traps, the plastic monitoring boxes that you just saw. We leave them for a couple of weeks and then we go back and we look at the wax blocks to see if anything's been chewing on them. And you can see in the slide here, the incisor marks that are left by rats are quite different to something that would be left by a vole or a shrew or a mouse. So you can look at the blocks and just have a pretty good idea about which mammals, if you've got any, are there, and if they're chewing on the blocks, they'll leave the marks. So it's one way of just keeping track of what's on site. So Middlehome shouldn't have any small mammals on it at all. We shouldn't see any chew marks on those blocks when we go back in a couple of weeks' time. That would be the plan. On Skomer, you would see them being chewed by the voles and by the mice and the shrews, but hopefully you shouldn't see the big teeth marks that have been left by the rats in the slide here. So that's what we're up to at the moment, keeping Middlehome safe, but also keeping Skomer safe as well. And then just one other thing, just because it's that time of year, and some of you will know about this already, but as we come into Manx otter fledging season, this is something else that takes up quite a lot of our time on the mainland side of things. As the birds fledge, lots of them get disorientated and end up in land, and you've probably all found Manx otters in your garden or dotted around Haverfordwest or wherever it is at various times. And this is a map from 2019 just showing where we picked up Manx shearwaters. So these are birds that are disorientated when they fledge. It might be a foggy night, a windy night, a stormy night, and some of the young birds just head for the nearest lights they see, and they can end up quite a long way inland. So we, in 2019, we kind of formalised a bit of a rescue plan for shearwaters. So we've basically got a team of volunteers that cover from Aberystwyth all the way around to Cardiff. Most of our volunteers are in Pembrokeshire, as you might imagine, as that's where most of the birds are fledging from. And those volunteers are made up of Wildlife Trust staff, RSPB staff. We've got several friends of the Pembrokeshire Coast National Park Authority, I believe, as volunteers in this project. Lots of the local boat companies, so the tour guides and boat tour guides, they're part of the project as well. So basically we have a team of people who will get a phone call about a bird in someone's greenhouse or in their garden or in Tesco's in Milford Haven, and we'll hopefully manage to get out between us and rescue the birds that need picking up. And there's a few here that are probably in my garage or somewhere. And what we do is we just, if they're healthy, we just keep them in a box over through the day to keep them safe. And then in the evening, when it's getting dark, we take them up to somewhere like St Anne's Head or St David's Head or wherever it is, and just release them back out to sea to get on their way. So the vast majority are healthy and just need a sort of second chance, really. There's lots of information about the shearwater rescue team and everyone involved and what goes on and what to do if you find a shearwater stranded in the next couple of weeks. But there's also a lovely sort of review of it on the Pembrokeshire Bird Blog diaries that Annie Haycock put together. So you can access the one about the shearwater rescue in last October's bird blog if you want to see it or hear about it. And you'll see in the next couple of days, if not already, that Greg on Ramsey has put out some posters for us. So there's basically phone numbers people can call. If you're not confident about picking up a shearwater or releasing it yourself, I'm sure lots of people around Pembrokeshire have been doing this for many years. They go out, they know what to do, they release them themselves. But there are numbers that people can call in various parts of Pembrokeshire and across South Wales and West Wales if they need some help. So those posters will go out in the next day or two and you'll probably see them. So yeah, I mean, the main thing you can do if you know anyone who owns a campsite on the coast, is a farmer on the coast, any contacts you have, if you can try and encourage them to keep their lighting to a minimum during the shearwater fledging period, which starts now and runs through September into early October. That's the problems we had last year. There were so many people in Pembrokeshire into September. The campsites were all lit up, the barns were all lit up, the toilet blocks were all lit up, and the shearwaters were ending up stranding with the extra lighting. So if you can encourage anyone to drop some of that lighting a bit, that would really help the shearwaters as they're fledging. And then the other part of my job, which I'm not going to tell you about today, because I kind of figured they'd probably like to tell you about it at some point themselves, is Cardigan Bay. So I also look after the team, the Living Seas team up at Newquay, and some of you will know the Cardigan Bay Marine Wildlife Centre. They do a fabulous amount of work from there, not only people engagement, but they do a huge amount of monitoring of the bottlenose dolphin population up there. It's a marine special area of conservation for them. I think they're only one of two resident, sort of semi-resident pods of bottlenose dolphins in the UK. The team up there, our Living Seas manager, Sarah Perry, who some of you may know, she supervises several PhDs looking at dolphin behaviour in the special area of conservation. And there's a massive team of volunteers who go out and sit on boats and do dolphin surveys as well. So it's a really nice thing to get involved in if anyone's interested. But I figured that maybe Sarah Perry would come and talk to you one day about that herself, because I don't have time today. So yeah, there we are. Just to sum up then, I've been in my role for 16 months, I think, or something like that. So I was just going to say what I'd learned, really. I mean, the main thing I've learned is how to fill in grant application forms, because I never had to do that at the RSPB, because there was always someone to do it for you. But Wildlife Trust South and West Wales is a very different proposition, and everybody does everything themselves, you know, with a lot of help from each other. But I've never had to apply for money before. I've always been in a lucky position in a bigger charity. So that's probably the first thing I've learned, is how to fill in those dreadful application forms, with some success, I have to say. I've learned a huge amount about floating offshore wind turbines very quickly, not enough, and I need to learn more to keep up with what's happening, but definitely something I've spent a lot of time on. I've remembered what it's like to look after islands with puffins on, because Ramsey unfortunately doesn't have any right now. But it's absolutely astonishing how many people want to come and see puffins and film puffins. Every single TV crew in the whole of the world seems to want to come to Skomer in May to film a puffin. So yeah, that's been a bit of an eye-opener again for me. I've learned loads about COVID, but I think we'll just ignore that one because we've all done the same. And recently I've learned a huge amount about walruses as well, and I really didn't see that one coming. But I'm sure we've all learned quite a lot about walruses in the last few months. So that's probably the thing I've had most emails about, I would say, this year is Wally the walrus. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening to me waffling on. Thank you for the people that provided my photos, and thank you for Dale Fort, who have allowed me to come and use their Wi-Fi. Thank you very much. If you've got any questions, by all means fire them over. And yeah, thanks for having me again, and hopefully we'll meet in person soon. That would be nice. And I will stop sharing my screen, and hopefully there we are. Is that back to normal?
So nobody has put any questions on the chat line. So does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I have. I've got a question.
Bernadette.
Hi, Bernadette.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of 3 points really about these floating wind turbines. Have they actually made planning application for them? Is it at planning application stage?
Yeah, so what they do is they basically, what happens first is the Crown allocate areas of seabed for the and give the leases to the developers. So that's all happening now. Then they go away and they do all the environmental impact assessments. So Erebus is an example, which is the first one we're talking about, the demonstration site. That's just about finished the 2 years. So they've done 2 years of survey work where they've looked at seabirds that are using the area, cetaceans that are using the area. They've looked at where the cable can come in. So all the environmental impact assessments are just about completed. They'll then, in December this year, go for full planning permission, basically.
Right.
And they look to get the first ones in the water by the start of 2023. So that's a bit of an idea of the timescales. Yeah.
Because one key important thing is cumulative impact. You know, you've perhaps heard them mention that. So it may be that one's okay, but, and that as a planning principle is really important. What you just said, it strikes me that you know there could be. And the other thing is,
I think, Bernadette, just to say, I think you're absolutely right there, because what they do is that they present each development separately.
But they can't.
And we as the Wildlife Trust and all the NGOs have been saying, you cannot expect us to consider one when we know the others are coming along. You know, we know they're all going to be side by side within the same lifespan of each other. So you're quite right. It's the most important thing that we're pushing.
Exactly, So as a principle, make sure that. And the other thing is, it strikes me as well, Prince Charles and Prince William are very environmentally orientated and keen to protect the environment and protected species. And I wonder if it's because they're probably with the Crown, there'll be different branches, you know, Crown Estate are the property people who are looking at trying to raise income for the Crown, but that, you know, from the environmental point of view, and whether it's worth contacting them direct, because particularly with Prince William and Kate, they seem to be much more keen on protecting the environment, and it seems to be the younger generation are leading the, you know, we need to save the planet, that type of thing. So anyway, that's just a couple of thoughts.
No, and it's a very good thought, and I think basically we're going to try and enlist the help of anyone who can help us. So that's a very good suggestion. And I think the problem with this is that we know we have to deal with the climate crisis. We know we need to generate. But also what we're also facing at the same time is the biodiversity crisis. You know, we're losing wildlife and, you know, biodiversity. we don't want to solve one. We don't want to solve one and make the other one worse at the same time. Really, it's a really complicated discussion actually, and it's you know, there's the science, but there's also the kind of how you feel about it as well. There's like the moral argument that we all have in our own head as well as to what's the right thing to do.
Well, there's a strategic argument about we all accept that we should be moving to the renewable energy, but there's places where you can put it, and you've got to balance. You know, the planners should be balancing everything up, and they should be looking strategically. Yes, we need it, but maybe Pembrokeshire next to those islands with Mount Shearwater population, it's very, very sensitive and actually isn't the right location to put it, and it can go somewhere else.
I mean, I think just to give you a little example, when I saw a comment just pop up there saying that turbines kill seabirds. You know, when they did the environmental, when they first sort of talked about these turbines, they said there'd be no problem because there's 22 meters between the sea and the bottom of the blade. And they said it's fine, all your seabirds fly close to the water and will fly underneath them. Now, I spoke to Oxford University, who've been tracking Manx shearwaters, and they actually track them using tracking devices on the birds, carried by the birds, as you probably know. So we know that Manx shearwaters don't fly at the same height in all wind conditions at all times of year when they're commuting. They don't do that. They shear soar, hence their name. You know, they don't just fly at 5 meters above the water. They fly between 0 and 30 meters above the water, and they go up and down. So there's things like that you know, very quickly become apparent that they don't understand the sort of behavior and biology of the birds we're talking about. So yeah, it's very quickly apparent that they need more information from us, and we need to steer them in a way to understand Manx shearwaters, organics.
You need to, in terms of the planning arguments, you do need to back it. If you can back it up with your data.
I mean, really, we are very lucky in Pembrokeshire because, as I mentioned, we have these long-term associations with the universities, with Oxford, with Sheffield, you know, with Exeter, and we've been following those seabirds and tracking them actually with tracking technology since 2006. So we have the information about how birds behave, which the surveys that the developers are doing have no way of picking up. So the information, the data is there, and we're sharing it with people. So we are informing that process and making it, you know, a lot better than it was. Let's put it that way. No, it's a very complicated subject, really, and I think we're all learning as we go along because it's novel technology that's no one's ever tried to put it in the Celtic Sea before. So
just a point of clarity, and thank you, Steve Shepherd, have been joining in on chat, supporting Bernadette's questions and everything. I've just had a quick look, and I was right in thinking the Crown Estates is nothing to do with the royal family. They report to the Treasury. Bad news.
Okay.
But that probably helps. That probably helps in a way because they've got no, Prince Charles and William have got no sort of financial interest, if you see what I mean.
I mean, the other thing is we're working under the context of the Welsh Government have really ambitious plans for how we generate our power, you know, and in a very short time frame, they want us to be generating virtually all of it from renewables, you know, which is admirable, you know, and that's the way we should be going. But, you know, there's a huge amount of encouragement from Welsh Government to attract that investment into Wales from these companies.
The other thing that I think is quite important as well is tourism, because the wildlife, and like someone said, it's a national park, that is really key to tourism, which creates jobs for Pembrokeshire. And if you start, you know, what's really special about Pembrokeshire is its wildlife and things like the seabirds. And if you start killing that off, you kill off the tourism. And then why would people come to Pembrokeshire? They might as well go to another part of the country. And I think if you can emphasize that as well. As someone said, special qualities. It's a national park because it's an outstanding national interest. And then the politicians might start listening if you say, look, it's jobs in your tourism economy.
And actually, in the last few years, we've had some really good reports about the jobs in tourism in Pembrokeshire, for instance. You know, the amount of money that our biodiversity brings in terms of tourism. So those figures are quite well known and quite up to date. So we do have that to use. So that's a good thing as well. But yeah, you're quite right.
Yeah, Bernadette and Sea Shepherd have recently commented around the impact on mammals and other organisms within the sea, not just the birds.
Yeah, so as part of these discussions with the developers, there are lots of working groups that I sit on. So there's an ornithological working group, which would involve RSPB, and it would involve the Oxford University professors. They come to that with me, so that's great, you know. But then there's the equivalent for cetaceans. There's another one for the impacts on the seabed, so like the benthic impacts of the cabling. There's basically bits, it's broken down into those groups, so you get the expertise in each one. So yes, there's not just the impacts on the seabeds, but all of those groups looking at all of those sort of bits of the puzzle, really. So yeah, it's a lot of meetings.
Yeah, I can imagine.
To attend, yes.
Okay, Mr. Pattinson put his hand up some time ago.
I did. All the blood's run out of my hand. It's been up so long. I think, Lisa, that you may have sort of given us some clues on the way through your presentation, but I'll ask you anyhow. In your long and illustrious career in this world, what do you feel is the sort of best and also perhaps the worst developments that you've seen come along since 2001?
Well, I mean, if we're talking about like quite specific things, you know, there was the tidal turbine that they put in Ramsey Sound, which was a complete disaster and, you know, cost a lot of taxpayers' money. So, you know, there's sort of things like that have clearly not worked and been a bit of a disaster. Yeah, I mean, I think at the moment we're just facing massive global issues, you know, so there are the things that are happening on our doorstep, for instance, Erebus, you know, plastic pollution on grass home, you know, quite local things, but actually as charities and as interested individuals who care, we just have to start looking much bigger. I think the best thing that I've seen in the last few years is that individual charities, you know, RSPB, WITSU, whoever it is, National Trust, the parks, we all work together. You know, all the staff on the ground, you know, it doesn't matter to me who someone works for. You know, 20 years ago, you couldn't speak to the Wildlife Trust if you were an RSPB member of staff. You know, it was as stupid as that. That's gone because, you know, we face much bigger issues that need all of our expertise and all of our supporters and all of our, you know, all the advocacy we can generate. So I think that's a positive thing I see, but we need to just harness that and go for it. And yeah, I think we're being bolder and a bit more outspoken now. And actually, I think whatever people think about charities getting involved in politics, you know, we have no choice now. So I think that's the good thing that I see happening, is that we're being much more pushy and bolshy and helping each other out. So long may that continue, really.
Good. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Can I just say a big thank you to Lisa on behalf of the Friends. I think it's been a fantastic talk, really interesting, really useful, and thanks very much for giving up your time, Lisa.
No, you're very welcome. If anyone wants to know more about Erebus and all those floating offshore wind things, you know, there's documents coming out of my ears. I don't want to send you 600-page documents, but if anyone is interested, by all means get in touch and I can point you in the right direction if it's something you want to find out more about. Very happy to help with that.
Ian, can I just add one more thing before you shut us all down? The Skomer Island online booking, you asked if anyone's had first-hand experience of it. I have, and it's so much better. It makes life fantastically easy to get on there. Tremendous.
So I'm very happy to hear it, and it's something that I've always thought we should have, even like looking in at the Wildlife Trust as someone who wasn't part of it. So, you know, it came about through COVID, but it has so many other benefits. And yeah, I'm glad it's working. What I found is it's working for a lot of local people. So we've got people who can now come on the bus from Haverfordwest because they can book an 11 o'clock boat. They can use public transport. You don't need a car. You know, that's not been possible before. So I'm really happy to see some of our locals coming to the island again.
I mean, I have seen our guests leaving here at 4 o'clock in the morning, heading down in the hope that they will be able to get on, and then coming back looking pretty miserable.
Yeah.
The other thing you mentioned was Nathan Walton, and you again hope you'll be pleased to know that we had a fantastic talk from Nathan a few weeks or months ago, and indeed next week, as a sort of second part of that, we're off to Kilgerran. We've got
fantastic.
28 members are going to the trip at Kilgerran next week.
Oh, amazing. You'll be able to see the new otter then. Have you seen
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, look forward to that.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, well, that's great. Good news.
Yeah.
I'll be there on Friday, so I'll have a little walk around Kilgerran as well. But no, I'm glad. That's really good. Yeah. Good to hear.
Well, Lisa, on behalf of everybody, I know Steve's already said it himself as our chair, but it's a fantastic thing to get a real insight behind the scenes, fly in the wall sort of insight into how these things work and all the amount of effort that has to go in to cover off things that the general public like myself just doesn't even think about. But the other great thing is that we see it with Nathan, we see it with you, we've seen it with some of our other speakers as well, tremendous amount of enthusiasm within the way you do your work and for your work, and that's absolutely encouraging to all of us. So thank you hugely for all of that.
No, you're very welcome. No, and it's nice to see you all again.
Yeah, excellent.